Kia ora, Internet.
Hello and welcome to the Sky Bear Games podcast, where
We're back from outer space. Or rather, we're back from Wellington, where we just attended the PAVs.
More than that, it's got many names. It's the New Zealand Games Festival. It's also contains within it the Level Up exhibition and the Play-by-Play conference and the PAVs, aka the New Zealand Game Awards. It's a multitude.
You could say it's bigger than you know.
He did the thing! All weekend long, the speakers were...
the topic, the catchphrase was bigger than you know.
And you just did it just then.
I was really worried I'd get it wrong. You'd be like, James, it's larger than you know.
No. Yeah, so we went down, we spent the first half of the week on a family holiday, and then, well, I say we.
All being sick.
Yeah, well, that was me as well. But then James had to look after our child, and I swanned off to play professional game developer.
Which in practice meant that I got to look at a whole lot of beautiful native birds and go to the zoo and push a pram up very, very, very steep hiking tracks.
Oh,
good exercise. And go shopping, which was fun.
Yeah, to be fair, you did make some good purchases. Well, let's get into what I did, because what I want to talk about today is all the workshops and talks I attended. This is two birds in one hand, the less deadly metaphor, which I prefer. Catch two birds with one hand, where I not only transmit the knowledge...
Two birds in the hand is worth a stone in the bush?
Hang on, no. It was to catch two birds with one worm or something. I don't know. Two fish with one bait. I don't know.
Two birds in the hand gather no moss.
Do you know what my favourite? When I was I think I was 8, and I saw a collection of things where they'd taken one half of a proverb, and then given it to kids around about my age, and even as an 8-year-old, I was still like, that's genuinely I'm going to remember this joke for the rest of my life. And it was, when the blind leadeth the blind, look out! Sorry to any blind listeners out there. Anyway.
Or birds. Anyway, I'm quite keen to hear about...
I was going to say, the dual purpose, to speak in less flowery language now, is to not only transmit my knowledge to you, James, but to our listeners of our podcast. The Play-by-Play conference was actually... it was just such a wonderful experience. It was very educational for me. It was very welcoming, very inclusive as a space. And now that I've been there and seen it for myself, I actually know that James could very well come in next year and actually feel included in most of the stuff, because I was worried that it would be very techy.
And it sounds like there are a few things that were.
Actually, one.
Not nearly as much as...
There was only one techie talk.
Thought.
Yeah. Or perhaps my knowledge is bigger than I knew. Anyway, there was only one talk, and we'll get to that one. There was only one talk, really, that I didn't fully understand. So, okay, I'm going to get straight in with the two workshops that I took part in. So these were optional ones with limited spaces, and they went for 3 hours rather than the talks and stuff, which went from 15 minutes to half an hour. Sometimes longer with a Q&A.
Right. So were there several workshops and you chose?
There were actually only 2, so it really was first in, first served. You had to put your name online, thankfully, otherwise, I wouldn't have stood a chance. So I went for the soft skills type of workshops, whereas there were some more techie workshops that had larger sizes. So in the morning, I went for a marketing themed one, and in the afternoon, this was on the Thursday, 22nd of April, marketing in the morning, leadership in the afternoon. So I will tell you all about, and I'll also sort of provide you a narrative arc for my weekend. So I had been quite sick the day before I went to the conference. Not COVID sick, but I was coming down off cortisol, I want to say. I had been very stressed for some time.
To me, it seemed the sickness that all teachers get in the first week of the school holidays.
Yeah.
When you've been going absolutely flat out and you've been stressed out and you've been too busy to be able to relax.
I was
and
saying,
then you relax and your body immediately goes, oh, we're relaxing now? Okay, I quit. And
Yes. I was saying to you and Mum, because I hadn't even thought about it up until then, but given sort of things that had been happening with Armageddon, with the shift in my career, with not really getting a break over Christmas because of childcare, I don't think I've actually had a break since August last year. So I've been going for eight months solid, and so after 3 days of family holiday, I stood out of bed the day before the conference, and my head swam and I wanted to throw up. So I went and lay back down in bed and I ate toast for the rest of the day and crackers. And just generally felt sorry for myself. I think you managed to get out of
bed about 12 hours later or so.
I think I got out around about dessert time. Funny that. I still had just toast for tea, but then I think I was able to have a little bit of ice cream that night. So I was a little bit worried going into the conference that I wouldn't actually make it, but I went in there armed with my bottle of Powerade and, disguised in my Pikachu bottle.
Your new Pikachu
My new Pikachu bottle that I bought on holiday.
What's the point of holidays if not to spend money?
I know, right?
Indulge in gross capitalism.
So I went in there and I was super, super nervous because this first session was how to not suck at selling games with Tim Ponting. I suck at selling games.
We both suck at selling games. As both our listeners to this talk will know, our product tends to be viewed by friends and people close to us. And there's a small number of people that we reach beyond that, really. But we are not one of the bigger channels.
Yeah.
So marketing is something that we could benefit from.
Yeah. I went in there, I signed up because I was like, this is definitely something I need to learn. Desperately need to learn to even begin to recoup from the cost of developing the games I've done. I was extremely nervous and sitting there with my imposter syndrome, but as people sort of introduced themselves around the room, it was like, oh, okay. There's some people here who haven't even released one game, so it's like, okay, we're all valid. We're all allowed to be here. We're all learning. I don't need to have this imposter syndrome. That, of course, didn't get rid of it, but it went a small way towards.
If it was that easy to get rid of imposter syndrome, we all would have done it.
Exactly. So there's the beginning of my narrative arc, and it will come to a
it'll go full circle.
It will go full circle. It will have a satisfactory conclusion by the end of this podcast. So Tim Ponting is the establishment director at Code, and Code is based down in Dunedin, and basically it's everything that I want to exist up here in Auckland, but it's in Dunedin and it only serves Dunedin.
So what is it?
So funding, mentorship for video game developers. Yeah.
Do
you want to move down to... No, never mind.
No, it's cold.
It is, but it's also very Scottish.
It's also very cold, which I suppose is very Scottish.
Yeah. Establishment director got to do a lot with funding and marketing, and his long career spans a number of important companies, as well as having companies be clients of his marketing brands, which he later formed. So Activision, Blizzard.
I think I've heard of them before.
Yeah. He was involved in releasing a bunch of magazines and stuff. He knows his stuff. So I think a few pieces of paper here in the stack that I have of his, he called $1 million piece of paper. So it's yeah.
Right.
Now, people might have been a little bit confused by the way that his session started, because basically we were all waiting there pens ready, okay, give us exactly what we need to be posting at what time, what's the checklist. But he took it right back to basics, and he kept... And this sort of plays into where the narrative is going. He sort of kept almost embarrassingly apologizing for this probably isn't what you're expecting, but this is what I believe you have to do to get it right from first principles, right? So the first worksheet was, why am I making this game?
Right.
And he made us sort of check our expectations against reality of, are you making this game for fun, for profit, for art, for friends, for serious commercialism? And then from there, are you doing it in are you doing it with an engine that you know really well, or are you doing it new? Are you learning? Will you be releasing it to the public? You know, is it expected to be finished, or is it going to sort of build over time? Or will it be okay if this fails to deliver? Or will you be endangering not only your own, but other people's livelihoods if it fails?
Right.
So building on this matrix to sort of make us think about where do we even stand right from the beginning.
Before you even start looking for marketing or funding or anything.
In his mind, and I'm sort of starting to understand this more and more as I think about not only what he said, but what other people said in other talks. It's actually super important to be thinking about the marketing right from the get-go and not thinking of it as we typically think of marketing, but like right from first principles of when you're thinking about a game. What is it that's grabbing you about that idea, and what will it make other people latch onto? What will make them want to talk about it? The next worksheet is
the elevator pitch.
Basically, yeah, and he has a different name for that, which we'll get to when I get to that worksheet. So the next worksheet was, can I make this game? And it's like a very bracing flowchart of like...
I had to look at this one.
I heard you giggling about this. It was, very good of like, do I have all the skills required to make this game? Yeah. Are you lying to yourself? Yes. and that sort of tone. So like, working your way down to like, do you have a full game design document? And all the way through this chart to like, are you going to have funding or not? Who's going to own the IP? You have to think about, if you're doing this as a collab, who legally owns this? And if it's shared, you need to make sure, you've got everything airtight. If it's not shared, are you paying everyone? Because you really should be. Where's the money coming from? All of those very sensible considerations. The next thing he had us do was he said he got us to look at what makes our favourite games different and distinctive, and then he made us do it to our own games or game ideas that we're developing. Right. And the main point of this, along any sort of axis you can think of, aesthetics, gameplay, genre, etc., is what are the points of parity and what are the points of difference? So that you can say to people, like a quick elevator pitch sort of thing of like, it's like this, but here's the twist. Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't go too deeply into this one because we needed to clip along with time, but he did also have a worksheet that says, am I taking on Goliath here? Fair question. Like, is this something that a AAA studio has done within the last 5 years? And I'm doing it, but
it's just me.
It's just me. I don't have photorealistic graphics.
Work.
I don't have a distinctive art style. I don't have all these resources.
Yeah.
Yeah. Am I doing something dumb?
Yeah. Just thinking about what AAA role-playing studios are doing, and am I trying to do that on my own, but with no resources?
Yeah.
Maybe.
It's all about expectations, because the thing is, like, you can still do it for fun, you know.
Ultimately, my expectation is that I get a copy of my book.
Exactly. So the next piece of paper is really funny because it's, these are all the demographics, right? There's the old school demographics, like geography demographics, psychographics, connectivity, preferences, motivations, all these things that you expect. Like Facebook metrics go along of like, are you advertising to men or women? Are you advertising 18 to 65, whatever. Or then there's player taxonomies, like what sort of gaming are we talking about? Are people gaming with friends, gaming with kids, gaming to, relax? Are they explorers? Are they fighters? What are they doing? Are they achiever? Right. And then he basically said, throw this piece of paper out. This piece of paper is not worth it.
Huh.
Yeah. Blew my mind, right?
Okay, why not? Because I remember going to talks for advertising for like library events and things where we got told to come up with who your group is and then narrow it down and so you know that your group is left-handed 37-and-a-half-year-olds who recently moved to the city who speak 3 or more languages.
See, that there is move to the city. It works for local things. Gaming is a global thing.
Right.
You're trying to find your specific audience, but within the digital landscape. And even with all of the profiling that Facebook does, it's not enough. It's not geared towards the gaming stuff. Like, here's the thing, right? I mean, you might have a slightly easier time of it. I mean, I say that. When we do kickstart Dragons of Tyrrhenia, you might have a simpler time of it than I do because everyone knows now, at least, what a D&D supplement is.
Yeah.
There is no ad category for visual novels in Facebook.
Oh.
They do not know what that is. Their categories that they put games in are overly simplistic and not actually representative of how people actually sort themselves by what genres of games they like.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
so
helpful.
Yeah. So, instead, the way to market digitally when it comes to games is to ask yourself, what does the person I'm trying to get look like? What do they get excited about? And where on the internet do they hang out? Reddit? Do they hang out in a certain Reddit forum?
Right.
Do they hang out on even more old school forums? Sort of ones that talk about anime and manga? Do they,
Yeah, Discord. Is it?
Do they hang out on Pinterest?
Yeah.
Are you trying to target housewives? Like, if you have, like, a cutesy, feminine-looking game, maybe you are actually trying to, like, target Pinterest ladies, Tumblr, if you're trying to get, like, not so much kids anymore, but, like, sort of people around my age and slightly younger who are like, I'm the geeky kid.
Yeah.
Everyone look at the weird thing I like. Yeah, where are these people? Like, Facebook's a lot slower than that, but it's like you can build a solid base of support there. Kickstarter, if you can make it work. Hell, I've made it work 2 times.
That's true.
So I've at least got a heads up on people who've got nothing so far, So, not so doom and gloom. Another thing he said when I was on this page, I just noticed my note at the bottom, and I have looked into this, and I will be doing it, I think. I'm like 99% certain I'm going to do this. Instead of having our own stall at Armageddon this year, I'm going to apply to have the NZ Game Developers Association,
yes,
of which
you mentioned
I am
that.
a member, have them demo my game at their stall. So I have to physically be there to have this happen. But, I can have, it'll probably be Her Gentle Highness up there. And, so, and they'll do that for free.
Brilliant. Which is a lot better than what we spent at Armageddon last year.
Yeah. So hopefully,
not free.
And hopefully that will help me actually see who my players are, what they're into, what they look like, what cosplay are they wearing, where can I go to find them on the internet, where are they hanging out. So now we get to the thing, his name for the elevator pitch is the pub test, or the pub conversation.
Right, because people are more likely to chat in the pub.
Yeah. Elevator pitch is like what you do when you've got an exec standing next to you and you've got to quickly...
Yeah.
But a pub conversation is you're relaxed, you're with a friend, or you're telling a friend about something you're really excited by.
I played a game and it was cool.
Yeah. And so the things that he says are really good for a trailer or a demo or even like the first level of your game or whatever, there's a little psychological process. It's like the first thing is, oh, I recognize this kind of game. It's sort of like this thing I like. Second step, oh, that's a really cool twist. Third step, oh, this is tough. I'm not used to it. I'm going to have to figure this out. And then fourth step, okay, I'm getting the hang of this. Fifth step, surprise. There's another, I didn't expect that. And then after that, you sort of start looking around going, oh, my friend's playing this. And that's when you would go and have your pub conversation.
So it's interesting, but I mapped every single one of those points to Pandemic Legacy Season 1.
Right, exactly.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, you could map it to any successful game. Yeah.
Exactly like that, up to and including the, oh, here's a surprise.
Yeah. You're right. So any successful game generally would have that sort of structure. There might be exceptions to that rule, but it's a pretty solid rule.
Yeah.
Then we had another flowchart, the Funding Cascade, and I won't go into the depths of this, but basically it's going into, have you got this? Yes or no? Have you got this? Yes or no? You're going to need this before you apply for funding. You're going to need that. Are you crazy? Go back to design or, things. And then even when you get to the bottom of the chart, it's like, if this is your first game, good luck. Is this not your first game? You've got a slightly better chance, but still good luck. The main game-changing thing for these games is have a really good trailer or a really good demo. That's how you get noticed.
Yeah.
If you are a first-timer or if you're a second-timer, but not a big name or anything. So yeah, have a really good trailer, have a really good demo, get people interested.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where the pub conversation comes in.
Well, I think that's what you did with Fortune's Fool, isn't it?
Well, Kickstarter noticed me, thankfully.
Kickstarter noticed it.
Yeah.
Kickstarter went, this is cool. And in that case, I don't think it was even the trailer. I think it was just the image.
Yeah.
Was so striking, so well done that they went, that looks cool.
They
put it on the front page and people went, oh, what's that?
they had seen so many visual novels that all looked exactly the same, all anime art style, all generally dating and or erotic romance simulators, whereas mine was, sure, it had a little bit of like romance in it, but it was mostly an adventure.
So you're saying it was like that thing?
Yes.
But the point of difference.
In a number of areas, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. He went, the next worksheet was about what are my goals and how am I going to hit them? And a really good point he brought up was about hitting the right price point. He made a good point about there was this guy who put his game out for like $4 and it wasn't selling it at all. And then sort of over a few months, he raised the price up to $15, sold like hotcakes. And it was a good game, but it didn't get noticed when it was worth $4. Because people went, well, it's probably crap. Yeah. Because it's $4.
It's only worth $4.
Yeah. So you've got to hit the right price point.
Yeah.
Now, I think maybe I have with my games simply because that's what my Spanish colleagues have told me is Rata Like a Game, so I'm working with for the porting. They've said, look, because I had them pretty cheap.
You had them very cheap and you got told to put the price up.
Yeah, I got told to put the price up. So I put them up to those price points. And I'm happy with that. I mean, I even wonder, like, could I have gone higher? But I don't want to do that. Now that I've spoken to people who deal directly with visual novels, I feel like you must be in the right place. So, basically to sum up, it was about finding your community and thinking about that pub conversation, having a good trailer, having that thing for people to latch onto.
Yeah.
Get the story out there to get noticed.
Make people want to do your advertising for you.
Basically, yeah. So, with all of this, I was feeling pretty like, whoa, okay. I've got to admit, like, internally I felt like I knew, obviously, he didn't know me from a sack of potatoes. But everything he was saying was like, this is not this is what not to do when you're marketing a game. This is what not to do when applying for funding. He rattled off the list, which was like, oh, okay, I did that. And I did that. And yep. Okay, so everything I've ever done has been a massive mistake. Cool. So I felt like, the anxious, emotional side of me felt sort of attacked. And, logically I was like, look, he doesn't know that.
At the same time, he wouldn't tell people not to do things if they weren't things that people generally did and thought was a good idea.
Exactly. So, I had to steel myself.
Yeah.
Rush off to have a quick interview with in my lunch break, have a quick interview, video interview. So I'm going to have like a proper like video, like professional thing, advertising Wonderland Nights. And then the afternoon session was situational leadership and coaching with Jess Woodward, who is a friend of mine for like around about a decade. We don't see each other much, but she's great. And it was really cool not only to like see her there, but then to realize over the weekend, oh my goodness, she actually is like running this whole thing. Like, she's actually on the committee and, like, runs and MCs everything and is super involved.
Yeah.
So it was like, that's damn cool.
I think I've only met her once, maybe, once or twice, but she's good people.
Yeah, she totally is. So her session has not only been affecting me over the last week in terms of thinking about professional settings and relationships, but also, like, normal life, family and friends relationship dynamics and stuff. And I'm sure as I unpack the session to you will realise why. First thing we touched on was coaching and sort of how people develop through competencies. So, when you first start out in a job or at a school or learning something, your development level 1, so D1, the enthusiastic beginner, high confidence, low competence.
Right.
And then second, D2 is the disillusioned learner. Low confidence, low competence. You realise, oh my god, I actually know nothing.
I don't know how to do anything.
And this is really hard. But then you transition into the capable but cautious D3, where you're gaining your competence, but you don't yet have confidence. Sometimes that might be because you yourself acknowledge, I don't yet know everything I don't know. So you'll be cautious about offering anything. But you're still highly capable, and then you transition eventually into D4, the self-reliant achiever, where you're highly confident, highly competent. Now, the complementary thing to this was the leadership styles. S1, directing, telling the person what to do, high direction with a bit of support. S2, coaching, high support, high direction. S3, supporting, less support, but less direction. And S4, delegating, you just go quite hands off. And so there was a sentence for each, and it was, S1 is, I need you to do XYZ. S2 was, this is what I would do. What are your thoughts? S3 was, what are you going to do? Oh, here are my thoughts if you wanted them. And then S4 is, I'm here if you need me. And we talked about, what have we found in our workplaces and stuff with this? And some thoughts that resonated with the group was like, actually, you don't want to put D4s with S1s.
Yeah.
Because, they might feel a bit dragged down, and the D1 might be, completely overwhelmed. We actually probably want to put like a D3 with the D1, the capable but cautious, with the, enthusiastic beginner, because they'll sort of try and bring them back to ground and, point out, but you don't know this.
Yeah,
so
enthusiasm can be a powerful tool.
Yeah.
Competence is also good.
Yeah, and then, you also need to be careful that, you're not over-coaching people who actually know a bit more and stuff. And then I started to think of like, oh yeah, there were some areas in a workplace where I was a self-reliant achiever, but because my boss was directing me, I lost confidence and slid back and doubted myself and, couldn't do it. And then guess what?
Yeah.
I left. So, it's a very interesting thing to look at it that way. We covered communication, how listening is harder than you think. There are two facts. We are designed to interrupt, to feel included in conversations. And fact two, you cannot multitask on listening. And she proved this by making us try, and it was hard enough to be the person talking. You had to spell out what you were doing the next day, and the other person had to read spelling as they were listening, which I find that really hard when we're trying not to mention certain words in front of Arthur. I find it hard enough to keep up when people are spelling a single word so that the toddler doesn't hear. We went into how to talk to people and in meetings to scaffold and protect people's egos, because there's five major axes on which our safety in conversations lie. So it hurts, this can hurt or reward if in the conversation you raise or belittle status.
Right.
If you waver on certainty, if you affect someone's sense of autonomy, if the conversation's either not related or relevant, and sense of fairness.
Right.
So I pointed out an example that happened to me where someone in a group setting raised my status by giving me a bigger present than everyone else got, but everyone else felt that was unfair.
Right.
So in fact, they hadn't raised my status.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting dynamic. I thought it was all very interesting and very applicable to both workplace situations and out of the workplace. And we talked about challenging conversations, such as don't avoid them, have them often because it makes them easier. Don't assume that the person already knows, for example, that they have bad BO. They genuinely might not know. Workplace issues are often symptoms, so explore the unhappiness rather than just assuming you're late to work every day because you're lazy. Could be you're late because, well, in our case, we have a child. So there were a lot of really good points in that. Okay, I have gone on and on about those two workshops, and I could go on even more because they were really good and it was really deep learning. 3 hours
very
each.
Meaty.
They were super meaty. I'm going to move on now to talking about the much smaller conference talks. All right, so on the Friday, we started off with the keynote by Amber Taylor from Ara Journeys, and, well, it was the keynote, Bigger Than We Know was the title.
Boy.
And to sum up, her talk was about her journey with Ara Journeys, her company. They created the Journeys of Manu, which is a really cool AR storytelling app. Where basically, you can turn this app on and you can find a location where Manu is, and he will tell you local stories.
Right, yes.
Yeah, you might have even... Yeah, I mean, I think it even had things to do with the council, so
that sounds
you might have
really
even
cool.
heard of it. They've also got other AR games coming out, or some of them might already be out. Ahika Rangers is a citizen scientist app where you collect rewards for giving data about, how many butterflies are in my garden this morning, how big is my backyard, how much rainfall did I have, and stuff like that. And then Tūwhiri, which is a one coming out, I think it's coming out this weekend actually, which when the podcast listeners hear, it will already be gone, sadly. But they're having a Break the Build weekend coming up. Because I think it's just releasing. And
so what's this one
about?
This
one, you go around and you can listen to stories. You don't even have to have the visual part of the app on. You can just listen to the local stories being told. And for every story, you collect rewards, and then you can craft coupons for the real world out of the rewards you collect by listening to stories. So you can, get a free coffee from a local cafe, and it's always local businesses.
Yeah.
That is super cool. And basically, they just asked themselves, wouldn't it be cool if we could do X, Y, Z?
Right.
And they let that guide them. So her advice to everyone was take risks, build a good team, and network like crazy. So that was a pretty cool talk, and I want to download some of those games.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe I should. Maybe I should do that. And maybe we should talk about what we think about them next time. Maybe we should do that as our next episode.
Maybe we should.
The second talk was Stephen Thompson, Good Goods for Your Game. So he was talking about merch. He is from Fangamer, the website. And basically his advice about how to do merch is do merch early, because if you don't, somebody else will.
Yeah.
Good design equals good merch. So if the fans have story moments they want, if the fans see visual design they really like, or if the fans hear soundtracks that really speak to them, they are going to want to buy those things to decorate their house, to decorate their life. You've seen how many Pokemon things I have. My handbag, my water bottle, my coffee cup.
I am looking around this room right now.
He went briefly into you can do it yourself if it's really small scale. You can get print on demand, or if you're big enough, you can talk to a third party to be your licensed manufacturer for goods. And yeah, thing that he referenced as a good idea to check out is Grace Bruxner on making merch for your indie game, and she was the creator of Frog Detective, which we love. So
Frog Detective was wonderful.
Yeah, I need to read that article because Frog Detective was wonderful, and yeah, I want to know more about her journey.
Strange game.
So good.
So good.
The next talk really spoke to me because it's a story I know well. Philip Buchanan, The Long Life Cycle of a Game. This was a one-man dev shop talking about releasing a solo game dev game.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds somewhat relatable to you, Claire.
Everything takes more time than you think, and it goes way beyond just the development of the game. So to briefly sum up, I'm not even going to go into the time scales. I'll sum up the time right at the end. But here were the stages that he laid out for us. Prototyping, Kickstarter, fulfillment, playtesting, polishing, writing, voice acting, localization, Steam launching, marketing, actual launch, key requests, press, bug fixing, expansion contact, more localization, console ports, long tail strategies for everything petering out over time.
Yeah.
4+ years of full-time work for one game that is 39 Days to Mars, which I think I'd quite like to play. And yeah, I could really relate.
How many years did you wind up spending on?
Well, it's not
Nine Lives of Nim.
Well, I mean, obviously I started making it in 2015, but that was nowhere near full time.
Yeah.
But I think in October of this year, it'll be 3 years since I resumed it quite seriously.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'm still working on updates for it and stuff. The next talk was really fun. Andy Astruck did the NPC design primer, or if I can remember the name of the long name of the talk, Why Do My Players Keep Romancing the Bartender?
This sounds like one I would have liked to
You would have really liked this one.
Yeah.
To just sum up, his 4 major points of he was like, don't worry about progress, entertainment, player buy-in, don't worry about any of that, just worry about these 4 things. The little details. For example, Neo from The Matrix. Everyone remembers one thing about him more than anything else, and it's, whoa. That's everyone remembers that.
Oh, I was saying.
And hardly anything.
I know Kung Fu.
I know Kung Fu. Whoa.
Yeah.
Everyone remembers that moment, and they don't remember a whole lot of other things that were big ideas. It was just that little moment, Yeah. So if you treat people as people, not tools, if you describe your NPCs as you would describe someone else, say you were describing me to someone else, you would describe me a lot more interesting than you would describe yourself.
Yeah.
We all do this. We all downplay ourselves and tend to talk up other people we know. So if we treat our NPCs like that, they'll be really fun and stand out. 2, weirdness. Screw realism. Players will follow the strange.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
Yeah.
Actually, that's something I have a problem with. Every time I'm doing a realistic game and I try to make realistic NPCs, they feel a bit flat.
Yeah.
Because every time I'm doing a comedy game and I just let my NPCs go crazy,
exactly, right? Yeah.
Then everyone has a ball.
Exactly. Yeah. I totally agree. Memories or moments, and this plays into the pub conversation, right? There's a through line. This is a sub-narrative. This is a sub-through line to my actual main through line of the weekend. But the sub-through line was that players want moments of stories, of memories that they can tell other people. Hey, I did this really cool thing in this game. You're not gonna believe it. You've got to try it for yourself. Goose Game.
I was just thinking Goose Game.
Yeah, Untitled Goose Game had this in the 9s. It was exactly this.
Because every single thing you had to do in the Goose Game was a moment.
Yeah.
The entire game is just a checklist of, here are all the funny moments that you can create. Go to.
Yeah. Players want to connect with the characters. They want to connect with the moment and recall and enjoy. So if you actually make moments for the players to enjoy and remember with joy, then that's going to really stand out. And then number 4 was bangability. Or to actually, be a little bit less on the nose, emotions.
Right.
An emotional connection with the players. So sometimes, yes, that can be, damn, I really want to sleep with that NPC. He was saying that in his D&D games, half of the time, every NPC he describes as someone in his player group will romance that NPC by the end of the night. They make this emotional connection to them and they just want that plotline to unfold. So, a very fun little talk that had us all giggling. So the next talk was by Calliope Ryder, entitled Swiss Army Producer, and she was a creative producer on Best Friends Forever.
Which is another game that we'll talk about next time.
Yeah, which we're so excited to play. And she actually focused on why producers leave the industry. And there were, she talked to a lot of people on Twitter and places like that. Unprofessionalism, burnout, abuse, and, isms and phobias. And another resounding one was parenthood. Who would have thought about it?
Who would have thought?
Right? And factors that could have made a difference to keeping these people in the industry. She had discipline, growth, maternity rooms and other such things, access to the community as a wider community of producers to, run ideas off each other, mentorship, diversity in upper management. I've never had that problem. Teaching. Good project management strategies. So it was a highly specialised talk, but quite a revealing talk to, just for me, having worked in a number of different industries in my adult life, to realise there was a lot of overlap between different things.
Is this the one that you said made you really want to play Best Friend Forever?
No, we're going to get to that one.
Oh, we're getting to that one. Okay.
Yeah, eventually. Oh, the next talk was super interesting because it was something I'd never heard of before. The next speaker was Heidi Lukosch from HIT Lab in the University of Canterbury. She was talking about applied immersive games. So what they do at HIT lab is they find people from different industries, different workplaces who have a challenge. They find the problem behind the problem, because, often there's deeper levels to it. They find game mechanics and immersive tech to address the problem. And then the university develops the mature prototype. And then they want to work with game companies to commercialize.
Right.
So she's worked all over the world, and some of the things that she highlighted were her work in the Netherlands and, of course, her work in Christchurch. But there was some of the examples she showed us was a simulation of an airport terminal landing strip, because obviously you don't want to actually play around with a real one. You have to
practice on a simulator for that one.
But it's also obviously highly specialised.
Yeah.
So if you can hand over the mechanics of that to a game company, they might be able to make a more general game with it, where that's just one part of a game rather than the sole focus of a simulation. Another one was a board game that I forget which organisation it was, but it was one that does humanitarian stuff in places like Syria, right?
Right.
And so it was a board game about the logistics of doing humanitarian work in that region. And so highly realistic, but all abstracted as a board game. And they use it as a retraining mechanism before people go back into the field.
Right.
Yeah, so that's super cool. Oh, and something that she worked on in the Netherlands got developed eventually into a very popular gamified app, which is all about how to resuscitate people, rather than getting it in a boring lecture that you immediately forget. Because
doing things in a game makes it fun and less, or I don't know if confrontation is the word I want to use, but
sure, yeah.
Yeah, for training, if it's like, we're going to train by playing this game.
But this is something that everyone, if you live in the Netherlands or if you speak Dutch, you can just grab this on your phone and just do it. I could even go and download it, but I don't speak Dutch, so sadly it's never been translated. It goes too fast for that, because it's fully, you've got to actually do the tapping and the breathing and all of that. Yeah, but it's very cool.
Well, just let the first couple of people die while you translate it.
So a funny thing happened before the next talk. The speaker, the MC,
right, yes.
The MC was giving us trigger warnings for that this following talk would contain mention of social anxiety, and then the fire alarm went off immediately after the word social anxiety. So everyone like me in the room who'd been bracing themselves at the mention of that word suddenly jumped. I even screamed a little bit, it was that shocking, and we had to wait outside for a good half hour for the fire department to leave and stuff in windy Wellington, which was at least I could say, oh, look what Wellington did to my hair, and pretend that just wasn't what my hair always looks like. The next talk was actually something that I really needed to hear, and it turned out that as the weekend went on, I heard more and more people saying exactly what I'd been thinking, that was what they really needed to hear. So this was by Cameron Hopkinson, and the title was Navigating Networking for Neurodiverse Folks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I heard people talk. I heard about people.
You heard people talking about that, yeah. And they went through a few points. I'm like a butcher. I am really briefly summarizing this because there were so many more points that they went into. But here are some tips. Bring a friend. Choose off-peak networking hours. If you know that the middle of the networking session is going to be really busy, come right at the beginning. Leave and then come back right at the end when, most people are gone already. Try networking outside if you find the room oppressively loud or too crowded, or, if you have some sort of neurodivergence that means that, lots of stimuli like clocks ticking and stuff like that, Yeah. Experiment with different approaches because it's not all going to work the same for everyone. Safety, though, you've got to think about your safety. Stay close to an exit if you need to. It's a marathon, not a sprint, so don't feel like you have to go to every single networking opportunity. And some people just are butt faces. Networking sessions do sometimes have predators in them, so, make sure, this is especially where bring a friend comes in.
Yeah.
Or if you can't have a friend, if you feel unreasonably incapacitated for what you've been drinking, or if you've not been drinking anything, go and tell a staff member immediately because your drink may have been spiked or something like that. Yeah. Other things to make it easier, minimize sensory hell, try networking online. And I will be trying to do that because I much prefer that as well. And it's going to help with my social anxiety. And just, let people be ourselves. So, if you want to find Cameron, you can find them at www.accessunlocked.games. Because, I think they have a lot of interesting points. And okay, the next talk was Rick Stem and Josh Carmo on Beyond D&D, RPGs as Skills and Growth. Now,
see, this made me want to have a talk about Beyond D&D. There's other games out there, people.
They did say at the beginning of the talk they were using D&D as shorthand for role-playing in general. I know. Josh is actually the GM of Blame the Robot and Blame the Dungeon Master, a online thing. A lot of this, I felt like, at the beginning of the talk, I felt like you and I knew this stuff already. And obviously from the sounds I was hearing in the room, not everyone did. So I still thought it was very, valuable to say, which is that what they did was they went over their history of using D&D as a teacher, using D&D in the workplace. Just to briefly summarise those, D&D teaches cooperation, identity experimentation, conflict resolution, self-expression, active listening, creative thinking, adaptability, motivation, exploration of ego, self-esteem, decision-making, playing your ideal self, info sorting. Oh, this is especially as a game master. You can do a lot of info sorting, organisation, scheduling. These are all transferable skills and tools. You can use RP as a way to build and improve game mechanics. You homebrew to improve the player experience. But here's the part that I had never thought about and I was really interested to find out was using D&D as a game design tool. So at their workplace, which is PacPoc, a game development studio in New Zealand, they use D&D as a game design tool. They didn't go into too much detail about how they do this, but basically they explore their content design, thinking about their players, narrative design and things like that.
Right.
Within doing them as a tabletop session.
Oh, so what, they'll
refine,
do a tabletop game.
They'll refine their ideas.
Out the concept.
Exactly. They'll refine their ideas to make sure that they work as well as they sound they're going to work. You know what I mean?
Right.
And maybe find better, more streamlined ways of doing things through that. I thought it was a really creative and different way of using role-playing, tabletop role-playing.
Right, as part of the iterative design process.
Exactly. Yeah, quite clever, I thought. Oh, the next talk. This is funny. The next talk had a very mean-sounding title, and it was about how making all of your co-workers better by critiquing them.
Oh, which is what I do.
Well, yeah, I mean, so by Hannah McIntosh, who works at Cerebral Fix down in Christchurch in the art department there, and when I saw the title, I was like, oh my goodness, like, that sounds really mean. But actually, no, this was a really useful talk, and it was all about the iterative process. Within her department, what they'll do is when they, especially because her team in Cerebral Fix, they make games for clients.
Right.
So they will have people needing to approve, sometimes overseas, needing to approve the art assets that they make. So you want to make sure that you haven't spent hours and hours and hours doing something only to then have it sent back and you have to start from square one, right?
Right.
So they critique within their team before they send off to the foreign person. For example, in this one project she was mostly talking about in the States. So, they'll sketch and then they'll review within the team. And then they'll send it to the art director. And then when that's approved, they'll create the main asset. And then they'll review within the team. And then they'll send it to the art director. And then they'll implement it. And then they'll review within the team. And everyone on the team, even newbies, are encouraged to review. This helps so that the art director doesn't have to repeat themselves. And it encourages everyone to give and receive technique. And everyone becomes better at doing that the more they do that. So I thought it was really cool. And the Friday wrapped up with a talk by Juan, who gave us Show Me Your Passions. And it was a lovely talk that involved audience interaction, where we had to talk to each other about our passions, all about networking and how actually we do really like to hear about what other people have going on for them, so long as we're sharing the things that we are passionate about. And he told us all about running, because he came from Panama, running the Panama Game Jam. And it was Really cool. That was Friday. I will now quickly wrap up what happened on Saturday. Okay, so Saturday cracked off with Timothy Russell putting the noble savage to bed. And this was really cool to hear, actually. This was something that, I think, we all sort of think about in New Zealand and thinking about writing Maori characters. So he talked about how over time confirmation bias helps make a stereotype become concrete. For example, the warrior gene, randos that you ask about that, they'll still assume it's true. That was
the more it gets mentioned, the more people assume it must be a thing.
That was in the news in 2006. And people still today think it's real, even though it's been debunked. Even though, they were saying the warrior gene makes Maori men violent. That same gene, in New Zealand, Asian men tested even stronger for it. But the news focused on Maori men for a reason.
Didn't support the narrative, did it?
Exactly. That whole, and then there's also the times that it sort of does the reverse thing and it's still quite bad, which is model minority sort of stereotypes of Asians, right?
I remember a book that I read which talked about all the different stereotypes that we have of Māori. And there's I think they called it like the red Māori of like violent and warlike. And then there was the green Māori, so in touch with nature, so wise. And then the I can't remember all the different colours they had, but they were all colour-coded. Sure. And of course the whole point was that if you look at any one of them, you're ignoring the whole facets of the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And that the true experience is that they, like literally every other people ever, have a huge variety and always have done and are a little bit of all of these things and none of them all at once.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
These were some really good points that he put out that we can use these in any form of writing where we're putting Maori characters or any different culture from whatever your own is or from whatever the monoculture in your country is, rather than just transposing a culture into a fantasy environment, such as saying, my orcs are totally Maori, right?
Yeah.
Think about how the environment would shape that people and culture, because that's the thing, environment does shape people and culture.
Yes.
Like clothing choices, for example, obviously. But also like hygiene practices were wildly different the closer you got to the equator and the drier the climate than places where there are a lot of water or colder places, Challenge the stereotypes. Flawed representation is not representation. And real representation is not checkbox. So don't just... got my gay character, that. Check. Yeah. Cultural sensitivity reading. Be prepared to change what you are doing wildly, and therefore do it early. Seek help early. Do the cultural sensitivity reading early so that you can change your ideas.
So that you're not changing massive amounts of stuff.
He said that people come to him asking for cultural sensitivity reading. He will read their game or whatever product it is, and he will say, hey, this thing you've got here is not on. I think you should change it. And he'll get told,
Then what was the point of asking?
What was the point of asking? Yeah. So I took a lot away from that of like, I need to... Actually, with things that I'd like to do in the future, especially things using real world cultures, like I've got a big plan for something based in New Zealand, but with a lot of multi-ethnic characters. I do intend to actually... I want to have a paid writing staff for that so we can have a range of... Yeah.
I have a couple of New Zealand things that I want to do.
Yeah. And so, the more opportunity we have to work with other people and get other perspectives on things, the better. And even then to still seek out cultural sensitivity readers.
Yes.
Having
one person say, I think this is fine, that's just one person.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. The second talk was, and this one was done remotely because Gabriella was not feeling well that day. It was burnout and me. And I felt this one pretty personally too. She described multiple instances of burnout in her life and the symptoms that went along with them and how the symptoms that you might have might differ from the, the ones that medical experts tend to do. And she impressed upon everyone, seek treatment for the physical and mental symptoms. It could save your life. So I think a lot of us needed to hear it. I personally did need to hear it at that time because I came dangerously close to burnout quite recently. Repeatedly. Yeah. Now, the next talk was another one I really needed to hear, but for a different reason. And this was Lorian Gugic on content creators and their communities. And this is not something I'd thought about very much and didn't really even know a lot about it before she spoke. So she was a streamer before she started working directly with a video game company. So she's currently working as a community manager for Rocketworks, and she got her start streaming, and people would send her boxes full of merch. And that would give her, a lot of goodwill to, posting about their merch, streaming their game on her channel and stuff. And she was able to show us the sort of behind the scenes of her Twitter profile, for example, of how much engagement posts from her about games got. If you associate the face of the content creator with the game that you're trying to sell, it's really effective at bringing in the fans of that content creator. So I think I'm going to be trying to engage some content creators.
Sounds
future
like a
games.
good idea.
Yeah, rather than wasting money on Facebook ad placements, which seem to do nothing. The next talk I won't talk too much about because this was the most technical one. It was Ben Carnell, the swan song to Unreal Engine 4. It was still really useful because basically what he showed us was if you identify what you and your team are doing a lot of, you can make it easier and more organised by working with data rather than making discrete objects every single time. But like I say, it was a lot more technical. This would have been the one that would have lost you.
This was the one that I wouldn't.
It would have lost you, yeah. But basically he was just describing, as he said it, ways to take ideas from brain to game as soon as possible. And from what I could glean, it was good. The next talk had me in stitches. This was probably the funniest one all weekend. And it was Robert Yang, Video Game Sex. And so he designs video games with sexual content. He describes himself as one of Twitch's most banned developers. Some of his games include a dick pic customizer, a metaphorical game called Stick Shift, where you're driving a car, but it's like an autoerotic exploration where the stick shift stands in for, you know what it stands for.
I can follow.
Yeah, it was quite an explicit talk. But basically, it was actually a really meta talk, because he was actually talking about how people metagame within games. So don't just think about your game as your game. Think about, what if it's actually a game engine? For example, Final Fantasy XIV, and I did not know this, is apparently full of brothels. Player-made brothels.
Oh.
So a game that was designed to be a fantasy MMO has been metagamed into a sexy simulator.
I mean, that's like back when I played World of Warcraft, and we all knew there were neighbourhoods in World of Warcraft on the roleplay servers that you stayed away from.
You yourself took part in metagaming because people were role-playing more deeply in your servers than they would in the usual vanilla servers.
I remember we'd write plots, and then I'd make characters, we'd find costumes that their level 1 character could have, and then we would run them into the enemy starting zone, find a tavern for them to hide in, so that they'd be ready for when we were doing
that's so cute. See, you were metagaming. You were doing what I was talking about. And this talk had, I've got, in my notes, I've got a bunch of texts highlighted. This was, backed up by academic research and stuff. So, people are writing about this stuff in video games. And I really like that.
So it's about letting people play the game how they want to play it, rather than how you want them to play it.
Yeah. It was a talk about, exploring games as bigger than we know. Yeah.
Actually, that's one that's sort of resonating with me, because I'm thinking now about all the sort of really popular games that we play, and one of the big points with, say, Magic is that they want you to be able to play it in whatever way you want to play it.
Exactly.
Or D&D. Go wild, do your thing with it.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. I mean, sometimes people just like to play character creation. That's a form of metagaming.
Sometimes
people just like to...
In the future, actually, Claire, we should do character creation.
We should. Some people like to just build decks.
Yep.
That's a metagame. You're creating a game within a game.
Yep.
So the next talk was by Ben Tuhoi Kenobi and Rich Durham, and it was rolling the dice on the life of game dev. I think I got that title. I think I butchered that title. But basically, so this is pretty cool. They did like an interactive... Like, you filled in a Google form, it gave you a number based on your choices, and then you had, like, an opportunity to modify your choice based on the result. And it was like, did you get the funding for your game pitch? And basically, the major takeaway from this, because it's really hard to sum this one up, you sort of had to be there, right? But they were saying, things in the documentation aren't always true. They wrote it at one point and they probably never look at it again. The funding committee. They probably never look at that again. The documentation might be wrong. You never know a contact of your someone placed on your team who's not a dev could actually open some gates for you, if they have got contacts. The major trump card was leverage your contacts. They might be able to give you information you didn't know from the documentation. They might have an in, not that, I'm not trying to say conflict of interest or anything, but they might have an in with the fund or an in with the business who's thinking about funding you. But talk to people. Network. It's the biggest thing. People. Most important thing. Yeah. The next talk, going back to that sort of idea of having academic backing to what you're talking about, this talk had A Timeless Way of Building, a book from 1979, before we're even really thinking about video games, right?
Yeah.
But it was about how spaces don't feel real unless they decay. So games have to be intentionally aware of death and decay to make a space feel real, changing,
Right.
And this is especially applying to 3D games, but it can apply to 2D as well, I reckon. A space and an action is tied together, so a window with light coming through and there's a seat by the window, that's for sitting. But what if you're in a game where there's no sitting action coded in? The space is divorced from its action,
Yeah.
So
you should be able to do the thing in the place.
Games have to copy the actions of a pattern if they want to take the life from the idea of that space. But also, video games are capable of redefining life. So to you and I, who do not do parkour, we could look at a building rooftop in the city and go, there is a rooftop.
Yeah.
It has, a roof. You can see the extractor fans on the top. You can see a staircase. You can maybe even see a helipad if it's a big, important building rooftop.
Is your building turning into the Nakatomi Plaza, Claire?
Yes, damn it. Anyway, but if you're in a video game where your character does do parkour, then
it looks
the rooftop space is suddenly very important.
Actually, yeah.
Can you jump that gap between the buildings or not?
I am now suddenly thinking about the difference between when I visited New York and walked around the streets, and when I web swung up to the rooftops and then flung myself into a double somersault off the top. And it's the same city. It's recognisably the same city. Yeah. But it's a very different environment.
Yeah. The experience of the space is defined by the actions that you give the player to do.
Yeah.
Yep. So, I don't know, you can't really walk up as Spider-Man in that game and, join a block party, can you? Or can you?
At one scripted point.
At a scripted point.
But not just randomly.
Whereas if you were wandering around in New York, you could happen upon a block party and just join in and start.
With New York, chances are there's one going on.
Exactly, and you could just have an organic conversation with someone you've never met before, whereas you couldn't do that in a video game. You can't have a
non-scripted event.
Yeah. So, the actions that you do, but in real life, sadly, you cannot spurt webs from your wrist. And
Alas.
Yeah.
Alas. Wouldn't transport around the city be so much easier if you could?
Okay, so the next talk, this is the one you've been waiting for, James, was Brianna Fromont on art for small teams. And basically, it was a summary where they basically broke down the process of being a fairly new game artist in the context of doing Best Friends Forever.
Right.
Am I saying it was a best friends or best friend? I'm sure we'll find out when we review it next week.
Yeah.
But I'm very excited to play.
This is, of all the games from
This is the one you're most keen
yeah,
for. I'm most
This
keen.
is
This is my second most keen. I'm most keen for Umurangi Generation. But as I said, we will do that next fortnight.
If we can get enough time away from Pokemon Snap.
So, number 1, get honest with your experiences and your experience and your needs when it comes to doing a job of this size. The second thing that happened was material to pitch at the start, the foundations of the art, the things to really sell from the beginning. So she set herself up with mood boards, Pinterest, she got her fashion influence, researched audience influences, references, emotions, meanings, other dating sims, making decisions about the style of attractiveness. Because, in other dating sims, like I said about 9 Lives and stuff, pretty generic styles. Everyone's generically attractive in an anime way. She and the people at Starcult went, nah, we're gonna make these look more like real people and bring out the attractiveness in all different body shapes, different ethnicities. Yeah, and then start doing some sketches, and then logos as well is important. The next thing was key art, because you need from a pretty early on basis. You need your logo, and also the single image to set the tone. So dogs, people, rural/urban mix. Sort of like, Wellington as a setting. And then 4 was the actual production itself, and she went into some of the shortcuts she took in terms of producing images. And then finally post-production, updating, adding more art and doing merch and stuff like that. Basically it was like a massive ad for, hey, look at how pretty this game is.
It is very pretty.
Yeah, so I really want to play it. And we will.
Dogs.
And then the final talk for the whole conference was Lisa Blakey on Maori representation. And this is a nice little, it was actually really nice to start and end this day talking about Maori representation, because they actually did it quite differently from each other. Lisa started with, she actually had a couple of academic references here as well, which I think we should follow up on when we want to get around to that, because I think we'll quite enjoy that. I know you certainly will, Mr. Sitting here in your tweed coat academic here.
It's warm. We did a play yesterday. There was a tweed jacket in it. And this morning I was cold and I put it on.
You're looking very dapper. The 3 major things I took away from her talk were, number 1, mana in video games as magic points. It's one of the first, earliest things appropriated by video games, and it's still happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2, if putting a character with tāmoko in a game, you should have an artist actually design it in concert with the whakapapa of the character. There's some of these notes I actually it was more me writing them as she was talking, because she was inspiring thoughts in me. But yeah, she pointed out people just stealing tāmoko.
Yeah, well, there's so many examples of that one.
Yeah. And basically using it as shorthand for warrior and Yeah.
And to somebody who doesn't know what a tāmoko looks like, they might get away with it. But for anybody who actually knows it, they stand out immediately.
Oh, Maori Twitter will find you and they will call you out if you try and appropriate tāmoko. And then the third thing I took away was she just name dropped a whole heap of Maori games, such as Sparks, Maori Pā Wars, Taniwha, Guardian Maya, Maori Land Adventures, which, oh my god, maybe I should play that on a stream, looks like my jam, because it's basically like a Brechtian, hey, remember the noble savage who, gets on with nature and stuff? Oh, look, here's the Maori landing on New Zealand and slaughtering all the moa. And then you play as the white man who comes in and basically beats the brownness out of all the Maori that he meets and turns them into Europeans.
You can't hear this, audience, but that was the sound of my smile slowly slipping off my face.
Yeah, it's very... just...
That sounds awful.
But, pointedly awful.
Right.
Yeah, obviously written with a point, with a political point. And then Ngā doing Maori stuff in Minecraft. Yeah. And, of course, Art Journeys, she called them out, and Umurangi Generation, who, well, let's move on to the Saturday night, and we'll just close with that.
Yeah.
I think what we'll do for our next podcast, we'll see if we can get some streaming in. I'm not sure if we will, but what we might just do is do a review podcast of definitely all the games that won. All the digital games.
All the ones that caught our attention.
Yeah, I mean, there's not that many if we just do the ones that won. I don't know if we'll get to all the nominees.
Yeah, doing the physical ones could be a little bit tougher because I have to go out and buy a copy of.
I don't think we'll be able to get to all of that, but
yeah,
I definitely want to play Umurangi Generation. We both definitely want to play Best Friends Forever.
Yes.
We don't really need to play Wonderland Nights, White Rabbit Story, which won the narrative prize.
I think you're jumping ahead of yourself in the narrative there, Claire.
So yeah.
So on Saturday night,
we caught up with Rose the artist and Dave the proofreader at the PAVS.
The awards ceremony.
Yeah, it was really nice to see them, and it had been a very long time because they live in Wellington, so that's why they were able to.
It's really cool to catch up with them.
I felt my heart at rest because I'd been all, anxious all weekend. And, I did make friends. I met a few people. Shout out to Verena and Josh and Michaela and Jonathan. I sat with a few people and met some new faces and some people who, unfortunately, I don't remember their names, and that's not great. And shout out to the committee and everything. And yeah, so we got there, and after a weekend of feeling super anxious and imposter syndrome-y, there I was, accepting the award for narrative design and shaking non-stop for 10 minutes because, I don't know, it didn't really sink in. I don't know if it still has sunk in, but I now have a cute little wooden cube trophy that my son keeps taking and pressing the button and trying to put it in his mouth.
It looks like a wooden cube, and it's sort of like a slice of pavlova with a old school video game, arcade joystick on it. It's very cute.
It is very cute. And then, so to bring my narrative arc to a close, finally, as James yawns, the final award of the night was, I forget the full title of it, but it was the Tuakana Award for Tuakana is elder sibling. It went to Tim Ponting for being a mentor and an industry pillar in our space. And he got up to give his talk, this guy that, I'd met at the beginning of my conference experience. Decades of experience.
Working for all the biggest companies.
Who'd utterly intimidated me and made me feel like, oh God, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But thank you for teaching me all this stuff. And he got up there and he said, well, I have a bit of imposter syndrome. And I was just like, what?
If he's got imposter syndrome.
If he's got imposter syndrome, then I guess it never goes away. The end. That's kind of the takeaway. All right, we'll see you in a fortnight.
See you in a fortnight where we're going to review some of the games that we saw at the PAVS.
Definitely at least 2 of them.
At least 2 of them.
At minimum 2 of them.
Yeah.
Good night. Say the thing, James.
Keep gaming.